The VA flew my husband 8 hours from home to the Seattle VA for cancer treatment. But after he fell in the hospital, the whole course changed. The VA didn't diagnose his brain injury, and he declined so severely that there was nothing they could do but send him home on hospice. He wanted a second opinion, but they wouldn't allow him to go home unless I signed a DNR and enrolled him in hospice. But a surrogate's first responsibility is to honor what the patient would want if he could speak for himself. When I refused to comply, they discontinued his feeding tube without our knowledge or consent. End-of-life decisions are voluntary. The right to a second opinion, discharge, and to refuse treatment are all protected under VHA policy and federal law. They told me he might not survive the trip on the air ambulance because of the pressure in his brain, but the neurosurgeon had already documented that he had no concerns. Another doctor tried scare tactics. Todd could have a brain hemorrhage. When I asked what the hospital would do about that situation, they said there wasn't much they could do. So who stands to benefit if he died in the hospital? Here's an interesting twist. I was complaining to the social worker, and she mentioned she had heard that beneficiary travel was hesitating to spend the money for the flight home. Did they really ship a veteran to another state for treatment and then try to refuse to send him home to his family when he was dying? Because money? I ultimately had to sign the hospice order and DNR. Todd wanted to go home, and he was running out of time. Think about this. If Todd died in a VA hospital, one of the VA doctors responsible for what happened would decide what the death certificate said. The VA can refuse to perform an autopsy, and hospice patients generally don't get autopsies. A second opinion from outside Seattle and outside the VA was the last thing they wanted. They needed to control the narrative. That's not the worst of the story. My medical consultant says it was the, quote, worst case of negligence he'd seen in his career. You can hear Todd's VA malpractice story on my YouTube channel. Please like and subscribe to Second Watch. I've got a lot of useful insight to offer, but I can only help vets and their families if people know I'm here. Thanks for listening.